Welcome back, travellers. Tonight, we drift into the mists of myth and memory, where the lines between legend and reality blur like a distant shoreline. We begin with a name you already know, a name whispered in tales of gallant knights and golden thrones. Arthur, King of Camelot. But what if the story were more than legend? What if King Arthur was real, and more than just a king? What if he united not just Britain, but all of Europe? A single ruler, forging a peaceful empire out of the chaos of the early Middle Ages. A dream of unity, centuries before such things had names. How would that change the Crusades, the Renaissance, the world we live in now? Tonight, we gently imagine that world together. Let us begin, with a boy born into ruins, a child between the old world and the new. Long before books, long before flags and maps and formal borders, stories were how people understood the world. And no story echoed more deeply across the British Isles than that of Arthur. The earliest references to Arthur appear in scattered Welsh poems and chronicles from the 6th to 9th centuries. These were not yet tales of shining knights and mystical swords, but fragments, allusions to a war leader, a defender of the Britons against invading Saxons. By the time Geoffrey of Monmouth penned his Historia Regum Britanniae in the 12th century, the legend had taken on new richness. Arthur, son of Uther Pendragon, born in secret, raised in silence, and revealed as king by drawing a sword from a stone. In the centuries that followed, poets and troubadours would add layers of romance, magic, and tragedy. Merlin the Enchanter, Guinevere the Queen, Lancelot the Betrayer, the Holy Grail, and the fabled Isle of Avalon. But what if we strip away the magic and try to see Arthur not just as a figure of legend, but a figure of history? Let us set our Arthur not in a fantasy realm, but in the real Britain of the late 5th century, a land left fractured after the collapse of Roman rule. The legions had long since departed, and in their absence, Romanized Britons, Celtic tribes, Saxon settlers and Pictish raiders all competed for land and power. In this setting, Arthur is born, not of dragons and destiny, but of a noble Roman-British family, perhaps the son of a local warlord who still clings to fading Roman ideals. He grows up in a villa built on crumbling Roman stone, surrounded by both order and decay. His mother teaches him Latin prayers and Celtic chants. His tutors drill him in rhetoric and swordsmanship. His world is one of contradictions, mosaics cracked by time, robed bishops and druidic sages, war horns echoing over misty hills. Arthur learns to ride early, he learns to fight earlier still. But just as importantly, he learns to listen. He listens to old soldiers who remember the empire, he listens to farmers who remember hunger. He listens to monks, merchants, storytellers and blacksmiths. He becomes a boy who sees not just the world he was born into, but the one that could be made better. Arthur comes of age at a time of great uncertainty. Across the Channel, the Franks and the Visigoths battle for dominance. In Italy, Rome is a ghost. In the east, Byzantium watches warily. And in Britain, Saxon warbands push ever deeper into fertile valleys and crumbling fortresses. At first, Arthur fights like any other local leader, defending his clan's lands, raiding when necessary, striking alliances when possible. But he distinguishes himself through something rare: mercy. He does not burn villages, he protects both Christian and pagan shrines. He welcomes even defeated enemies into his service, offering honour instead of humiliation. This reputation spreads. Soon, lesser chieftains begin to swear loyalty, not through fear but admiration. They bring warriors, smiths, scribes. Camelot, still just a hill fort or Roman ruin, begins to grow. What sets Arthur apart is his vision. He doesn't just want to rule, he wants to heal, to bring together the shattered peoples of post-Roman Britain, not just by sword, but by trust. And so, he calls for something radical. The Round Table is born, not as a fable, but as a political revolution. At a time when kings sat on thrones above their lords, Arthur proposes something different. A table where no one sits at the head. Each leader, whether a tribal chief from Cornwall, a noble from York, or a Saxon convert from Kent, is given equal voice. It is here that the ideals of chivalry take shape, not just as personal virtue, but as policy. The knights of this round table are peace brokers, educators, protectors of the weak. They are forbidden from raiding without cause. They must learn not only arms, but law and languages. Many are young, sons of rival houses brought together in uneasy alliance, but Arthur insists they eat together, train together, learn together. The table becomes a centre of gravity. Neighbouring kingdoms take note. A Frankish envoy arrives offering alliance. Iberian nobles send gifts. Even Rome sends a blessing. Camelot grows, not just in size but in meaning. It becomes a beacon, a place where the future feels possible, where old enmities are not forgotten but set aside, where kings become equals and warriors become statesmen. Arthur, now in his prime, rules not just with a sword, but with the rarest power of all, hope. Let us pause here, in the flickering candlelight of this imagined past. What if history had bent this way? What if Arthur, grounded in wisdom and compassion, had risen to unite not only the warring tribes of Britain, but the kingdoms beyond? Already we begin to glimpse a very different Europe, one where diplomacy and ideals temper violence, one where the seeds of a gentler order are sown centuries earlier, and one where the boy raised on crumbling Roman stories becomes the man who rewrites them. From warring kingdoms to a continent shaped by chivalry, diplomacy and quiet reform. The fires of Camelot no longer burn merely to warm its halls, or light the feasts of knights. They flicker now as beacons across a continent. The world has begun to turn its gaze westward, to a quiet hill where something extraordinary is taking place. Here we gently imagine what happens after Arthur unites Britain. What might follow if the vision of peace he nurtured at the Round Table took root beyond the shores of his island kingdom? What if that vision, soft-spoken yet strong, reached into the heart of Europe and made itself a new order? As we travel slowly through that imagined world and explore how a single man and a single ideal could shape the future of an entire continent. Most medieval kings sought unity through war. They crossed rivers with fire and steel, drove people from their homes, and raised banners where walls once stood. But in this gentle history, Arthur chooses a slower path. In the early years after the founding of Camelot, Arthur's attention remains on Britain. There are roads to repair, laws to codify, wounds to heal. Saxons are no longer his bitter enemies, but allies, cautiously drawn into his circle. Pictish chieftains send carved gifts instead of raiders. The island is beginning to breathe again. But Arthur, ever the listener, sees the restlessness beyond his shores. Across the Channel, the Frankish lands tremble beneath the weight of succession disputes. Young kings war with old dukes. Religious fervour spreads, but so does violence. The roads that once carried Roman mail are now dangerous to travel. Bandits flourish, villages turn inward. Arthur does not send armies, he sends stories. Bards carry tales of the Round Table, of a realm where justice is blind, where nobles and commoners alike kneel before the law, and where the king eats at the same table as his knights. These tales reach abbeys and palaces. A young noble in Aquitaine writes a letter to Camelot. A bishop in Lyon begins teaching the Round Table's principles of arbitration. A marriage is proposed between a noble woman of Frankish blood and a knight of Arthur's court. Soon the first treaties follow. Arthur's diplomacy is unlike anything Europe has seen. His envoys carry no threat of siege, only parchment, language, and listening. He appeals not to pride, but to weariness. And in that weariness, other rulers find comfort in his consistency. His word is always kept, his judgment always fair. Frankish provinces begin to align themselves with Camelot. Not annexed, but embraced. In Iberia, the Visigoths watch. In the Germanic forests, tribal leaders listen. Even in far-off Scandinavia, young chieftains come to trade and learn. Arthur's empire grows, not through conquest, but by invitation. To sustain such a wide realm, Arthur understands that charisma is not enough. A dream must have shape, a vision must have structure, and so begins one of his most enduring legacies, the Council of Realms. The Round Table, once a circle of knightly advisors, expands. It becomes a congress of nations. Each realm under Arthur's protection sends one voice, noble, cleric, or learned representative. They gather at Camelot twice a year, not to kneel before a king, but to deliberate as equals. There are debates, of course, long ones. The Franks argue with the Saxons. The Bretons protest the influence of Iberian merchants. But the table holds. It is not quick. It is not easy. But it is real. Laws are shared across borders. Disputes are settled by council vote. Taxation is standardized. Not oppressive, but modest, enough to build roads and keep the peace. A shared currency is introduced, backed not by gold, but by the reputation of Camelot's justice. It circulates first in Britain, then across the Channel, and finally into the markets of the Rhine and beyond. Arthur does not crown himself emperor. He refuses. Instead, he is titled High Guardian of the Realm, a title that binds him not in glory, but in service. He wears no crown in council. His chair at the table is just like the others. And in doing so, he begins to build something that Europe has never known, a federation, not a collection of conquered lands, but a union of willing peoples. In real history, the medieval church often stood above kings. It anointed them, judged them, and wielded its own armies. But Arthur's Europe evolves differently. He is a man of faith, fervent in prayer, generous in charity, and protective of sacred places. But he does not permit the church to rule unchecked. In early disputes with Rome, Arthur insists on two things: religious freedom for all within the realm, and separation of spiritual and temporal courts. It is not a break from the church, it is a boundary. At first, the papacy protests, but Arthur sends letters, not threats. He writes of a kingdom where Jews worship openly, where pagan festivals are gently woven into Christian calendars, and where churches flourish not through force, but through trust.
He establishes a university in Camelot, where monks debate with rabbis, and Moorish astronomers teach Christian students about the stars. A council is held in Gaul, where bishops agree to support religious tolerance, not out of modern liberalism, but from a shared desire for peace. Religious persecution, though not eliminated, is slowed. Witch hunts never take root. Instead, communities are encouraged to govern their own religious spaces under the larger protection of the Arthurian laws. Christianity remains dominant, but less fearful, more curious. And in that curiosity, knowledge flourishes. The knights of Arthur's realm do not wear their titles lightly. To become a knight in this imagined Europe is to take an oath, not of fealty, but of guardianship. One must pass tests not only in battle, but in ethics, languages, mathematics, and philosophy. Each knight must serve a year as a teacher or a judge before being granted a command. Some work as engineers, overseeing aqueducts and bridges. Others mediate local disputes in border villages. Still others protect libraries from fire and neglect. The Round Table becomes less a court of heroism and more a civil service. Young nobles from the far corners of Europe travel to Camelot not for glory, but for the honour of education. Women too begin to be admitted, first in secret, then openly. Lady Ellen of Toulouse becomes the first female knight of the realm, known for her poetry and leadership in resolving a decades-old feud between two noble houses. The word chivalry, once meaning horse skill and war readiness, is slowly redefined. It now means service, kindness, courage in peace. A realm at peace becomes a realm that moves. Arthur orders the reconstruction of old Roman roads. He commissions way stations every 20 miles, safe houses for travellers, merchants and messengers. Bridges are repaired. Tolls are regulated. Bandits are hunted down by local magistrates, not war bands. Trade flourishes. Olive oil from Iberia, wool from Britain, fine glass from Frankish workshops, and scrolls from Moorish scholars move across the continent with ease.
Ports are rebuilt. A merchant guild is formed, accountable to both local law and the central council. Trade becomes predictable. Contracts are honoured, prices stabilise. Camelot, once a lone court on a misty hill, is now a hub of learning, commerce and law. Maps become more accurate, roads are safer, and the idea of a common European identity begins to form, not out of blood, but out of shared prosperity. Let us pause and take in this world, not in fanfare, but in stillness. In this chapter of our gentle alternate past, King Arthur becomes not a warlord, but a steward, not a conqueror, but a harmonizer. His empire does not stretch by fire, but by warmth, by invitation, by trust. And what is most striking is how quietly it grows. No one moment defines it, no great battle crowns it, only thousands of smaller choices, to listen instead of command, to write instead of raise, to gather instead of scatter. In real history, the Middle Ages fractured Europe into dozens of rival kingdoms, but in this world, unity finds its voice earlier, not perfect, not unbroken, but strong enough to change the course of centuries. Next, we will explore how this new Europe faces one of the greatest crossroads in medieval history, the Crusades. But for now, let the vision of Camelot at peace lull you into soft thought. Let the quiet hum of rebuilt roads the faint music of council halls, and the warm light of learning guide you gently into rest. What if Arthur's united realm approached Jerusalem not with chaos, but with diplomacy, mercy, and long vision? The world is still. Camelot glows softly. Europe, once torn by rival crowns and ceaseless bloodshed, has settled, gently, slowly, into something rare: unity. And now, far to the east, the winds stir again. In our real history, the Crusades began as a call to arms in 1095, Pope Urban II urging Christian knights to reclaim Jerusalem from Muslim rulers. The response was feverish. Kings, barons, peasants, and mercenaries joined the cause, some for faith, some for power, some for plunder. The result was centuries of warfare, sieges, massacres, and cultural division that echo to this day. But in this quiet reimagining, we ask, what if Europe was already united, calm, lawful, and wise, under Arthur's hand when that call was made? Would the Crusades still come? Yes, but not as you remember them. Let us travel now to that alternate past, bestie, and walk the slower path together. It begins as a letter. In the year 1093 of this reimagined world, the Byzantine Emperor Alexios I sends a request, not to a dozen squabbling dukes but to one man, Arthur, High Guardian of the Western Realm. Muslim Seljuk forces have taken much of Anatolia. Pilgrims face harassment. Byzantine borders, though distant from Camelot, are sacred to Christian memory. The Holy Land, home to Jerusalem, Nazareth, and Bethlehem, lies in the hands of a different faith. Arthur gathers his council of realms, not for war, but for discernment. Voices from every corner of Europe speak: Frankish bishops, Moorish converts, Saxon nobles, Jewish scribes, Eastern monks, women who remember the stories of Charlemagne, scholars who read Greek. And from this long, slow conversation, Arthur makes a decision. Yes, they will go, but not to conquer, to protect, to negotiate, to honour. Arthur does not call it a crusade, he calls it a pilgrim's peacekeeping journey. He does not summon all his armies. Instead, he sends 13 legates, each from a different realm, each leading 300 well-trained knights and 700 aides, physicians, translators, engineers, cooks, and diplomats. They travel not in a horde, but in processions, like moving embassies. The knights wear white cloaks, unadorned save for a small emblem of the round table stitched near the heart. Their weapons are peace-bound in leather. Their banners show no lions, no dragons, no blood-red crosses, only the pale gold star of Camelot. They move slowly, respectfully. They purchase supplies, they build wells in villages, they treat wounds. They help repair bridges left in ruins. Songs are sung in multiple languages: Arabic, Greek, Latin, Hebrew. At every city gate, they ask for permission, not passage. The people along the way watch in awe. Is this war? No. It is something else. It is Arthur's chivalry, alive. The first major encounter comes at the gates of Antioch. In real history, the Crusaders laid siege to the city for 8 long, bloody months, leading to starvation, betrayal, and massacre. But here, the approach is different. Arthur's ambassador, Sir Ewan of Gwent, requests audience with the city's Muslim governor. He brings no demand, only conversation. They speak through translators, they share dates and coffee, they exchange books. And when asked why they have come, Sir Ewan replies, "To walk where our prophets walked, to ensure pilgrims walk safely, to bring no fire, only understanding." The governor, cautious but curious, agrees to a pact. Christian pilgrims may pass. Muslim citizens remain protected, markets are opened, and for the first time in history, Antioch becomes a shared sanctuary. The Arthurian legates leave behind a small garrison, not soldiers but builders. They help restore a broken aqueduct and leave behind healing salves. No siege, no blood, no conquest, just breath. Word travels fast. When the Arthurian hosts reach Jerusalem, the city's Fatimid governor sends an envoy before they arrive. They meet outside the city walls, beneath an old olive tree. The governor expects demands. Instead, he receives questions. Can your market support pilgrim traffic? Are Christian shrines in good condition? Would you permit joint guardianship of holy places? Can Jewish scholars help guide preservation of sacred texts? The governor is stunned. He agrees to host a council. For 7 days and 7 nights, leaders of Christian, Muslim and Jewish communities sit under awnings in a garden near the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Arthur himself does not attend. He remains in Camelot, but his words are read aloud by a Moorish-born knight, Lady Rania of Leon. The sword may win a city,
but the soul of a city is kept only by mercy. Let us be worthy of the ground we claim is holy. By the end of the council, an agreement is reached. Christian and Muslim shrines are jointly protected. Pilgrimage routes are secured by neutral guards. Jewish communities are granted stewardship of archives and libraries. A shared calendar of holidays is established. A Council of Jerusalem is formed with permanent seats for all three faiths. In our real history, the Crusades created accidental bridges of knowledge. Greek philosophy, Arabic medicine, and ancient texts filtered westward through conflict. In Arthur's world, this exchange is not accidental, it is intentional. Arthur orders his legates to study, not loot. They visit mosques and schools. They copy texts in astronomy, geometry, medicine, and ethics. A special gift is arranged. The entire medical library of Damascus is duplicated by hand and delivered to Camelot, where scholars of every background gather to translate. In return, Arthur sends Latin scrolls of legal reform, maps of Europe, and copies of round-table treaties to Cairo, Baghdad, and Cordoba. No sacking, no burning, only exchange. And so, the so-called Crusades in this world become not wars, but a golden corridor of cooperation. By 1110, the last legates return to Europe, not as victors, but as storytellers. They bring back no relics of war, only books, instruments, poetry, new recipes, silk and spices, and friendships. The Council of Realms declares the mission a success, not because land was claimed, but because trust was built. Knighthood changes forever. Future knights study languages, ethics, medicine, and architecture before they ever take up a sword. Pilgrimages now include not only churches, but visits to Moorish observatories, Jewish libraries, and Byzantine gardens. Arthur, now in his later years, walks the halls of Camelot slowly, with scrolls in his hands, listening to young scholars debate law and astronomy in 4 languages. His dream has endured, not through dominance, but through dignity. The Crusades were, in our world, centuries of chaos and pain. But in this world, Arthur's world, they became a chance to choose another way. Not one without hardship, not one without misunderstanding, but one without massacre, without flames, and without the tearing of the world into us and them. We've dreamed of a different Jerusalem, one with open gates, shared gardens, and scholars seated beneath ancient trees, not sharpening swords, but turning pages. Next, we will follow the golden ripple of this piece into the age of art and discovery, the Renaissance, born not in Florence alone, but across a united continent, guided by Camelot's long shadow. For now, let us rest here, beside this olive tree of history that never grew, but might have. Let it shade your thoughts and quiet your breath. What if Europe blossomed in the 1100s instead of the 1400s? A Renaissance born of unity, learning, and peaceful exchange. Let us begin, dear listener, with a sunrise. Not over Florence, not over Venice or Paris, but over Camelot. The halls are quieter now, though still full of life. The clang of swords has softened into the whisper of pen on parchment. Merchants arrive before the sun, carrying goods wrapped in silk and stories. Students rise early to fetch water, their robes stained with ink and charcoal. It is the year 1135, and in this world, this gentler path we've been tracing, the Renaissance has already begun. In our real timeline, the Renaissance took centuries to emerge. It was shaped by the fall of Constantinople, the rediscovery of classical texts, the rise of wealthy merchant families, and the invention of the printing press. But in Arthur's united Europe, calm, connected, and guided by justice, the conditions for rebirth come early, and they do not require collapse to bloom. By the mid-12th century, universities have sprung up in major cities across the realm, not just in Camelot, but in Toledo, Bordeaux, Cologne, and York. These institutions are not controlled by single kings or bishops. They are chartered by the Council of Realms, accountable to scholars, citizens, and the legacy of the Round Table. They teach not only Latin scripture, but Greek philosophy, Arabic medicine, Hebrew mathematics, and Celtic astronomy. They teach ethics alongside engineering, architecture alongside poetry. Women are not locked out of this learning. Queen Guinevere, now old and revered, funds the Abbey of the Quill, a school for young girls in southern Britain. Its alumnae become scribes, midwives, librarians, and lawmakers. The idea that knowledge belongs to everyone takes root, and it grows.
At the heart of this early Renaissance lies an old dream made new, the preservation and spread of knowledge. Arthur's peaceful crusade brought home not just scrolls, but systems, cataloguing, preservation, commentary. In the decades that follow, a great project begins, the Codex Concordia. It is a multilingual archive, a grand effort to copy every known manuscript in Europe and the Near East into shared libraries across the realm. Scribes work slowly and silently. Each book is hand-bound in leather. Margins are left wide for generations to comment and question. But this world moves faster than ours did. Without constant war, innovation blossoms early. By 1147 in the city of Bruges, a Moorish Jewish inventor named Menas ben Yosef develops a crank-operated rotary press. Unlike Gutenberg's later invention, this one spreads quickly, protected not by guild secrecy but funded by Arthur's open grants. Books become common. Not everywhere, not yet, but no longer rare. Monasteries open their libraries to the public on market days. Travelling educators carry boxes of books to villages. Knowledge becomes portable and personal. For the first time in centuries, a shepherd can own a prayer book, a baker's daughter a volume of poetry, a stonemason a guide to geometry. In our world, medieval maps were often fanciful, full of monsters, angels, and unexplored fears. In Arthur's world, they become accurate, not perfect but useful. Trade has flourished under the stability of the Arthurian Federation. Roads are paved, ports are standardized, tolls are fair. Merchant guilds share information rather than guard it. From the warm coasts of the Maghreb to the icy fjords of the Norselands, trade routes form a delicate breathing web, and along these paths, mapmakers travel. By 1150, a cartographic academy in Bordeaux begins compiling first-hand merchant accounts into navigable maps. They mark rivers, roads, borders, and cultures. And unlike their counterparts in real history, these maps are public, distributed by press, updated every decade. Trade expands in every direction. Frankish glassware and British wool reach Damascus. Moorish oranges and cinnamon arrive in York. Scandinavian silver flows south. Indian textiles reach Venice via Alexandria, where Arthurian merchants are granted neutral trade status. There is piracy, yes, dispute, but the difference is infrastructure. Peace allows consistency, and consistency invites discovery. Explorers trained in Arthur's schools begin theorizing, centuries early, about the curvature of the earth. They calculate wind patterns. They gather celestial maps from Arab astronomers. They debate the existence of other continents, not yet confirmed, but suspected. The age of exploration in this world begins not in the 1400s, but by 1170.
In our world, Gothic cathedrals took centuries to rise. Patrons were few, and wars often halted construction. In this alternate Europe, cathedrals rise faster, not rushed but supported, funded not by conquest, but by collected taxes from peaceful trade, built not to glorify one ruler, but to represent the entire realm. Architects from Iberia, Gaul, and the Levant collaborate. The result is a new style, the Arthurian blend, a fusion of Romanesque structure, Moorish arches, Byzantine domes, and Celtic symbolism. Inside, stained glass tells not just biblical stories, but tales of science, exploration, and the virtues of compassion. Walls are inscribed with lines from Hebrew psalms, Latin hymns, Arabic poetry, and Welsh laments. Art, too, changes. Painters are no longer servants of power, but citizens of beauty. A guild of artists is formed in Lyon, sworn not to any church or noble house, but to public works. Their frescoes adorn city walls, schools, and hospitals. They depict Guinevere reading to orphans, a Muslim doctor and Christian nurse tending a plague victim together, an Arthurian knight helping a Moorish sailor off a sinking ship, philosophers under starlight debating with kindness. Beauty is no longer confined to palaces. It belongs to the people. By the end of the 12th century in this alternate world, Europe is something unfamiliar to us, yet strangely comforting. Its roads are safe. Its schools are full. Its markets are open. Its leaders are chosen through council, not war. Its people, while still human and flawed, live more by shared purpose than fear. Camelot still stands, not as a shining city on a hill, but as the beating heart of a network of learning, art, and order. Arthur has long since passed away. His tomb lies in a quiet glade, marked only by a stone that reads, "He chose the round table, that all might have a place." But his dream endures. A child born in Bruges in 1175 can grow up reading Arabic geometry, listening to Hebrew parables, writing Latin poetry, and learning Celtic healing traditions. They may never see war. They may never need to kneel. They may simply grow. And that, dear listener, is a renaissance not of reaction, but of readiness. It did not come from crisis. It came from care.
What if Europe discovered the New World not with swords but scrolls, not with conquest but with care? Its sails catch the morning wind off the coast of Iberia, its hull creaks with quiet purpose. There are no banners of blood, no drumbeat of war, only the gentle rhythm of curiosity. The year is 1189, and Arthur's Europe is about to meet the wider world. In our world, the age of discovery surged forward in the 15th and 16th centuries. Driven by competition, greed, and the lure of spice and gold, European ships swept across oceans, often bringing devastation in their wake. But in Arthur's Europe, that pace has slowed, not from lack of ambition, but from a deeper sense of preparedness. The great institutions born during the early Renaissance have changed the very purpose of exploration. No longer is it a race to stake flags or conquer islands. Instead, it becomes a question posed by scholars, priests, traders, and dreamers. What lies beyond, and what can we learn from it? Camelot's Council of Exploration, formed by the early 1170s, consists not of naval commanders but of cartographers, natural philosophers, linguists, and spiritual leaders from multiple faiths. Its charter is simple: to explore in peace, to meet with reverence, to record with honesty. Ships are funded not by monarchs seeking glory, but by guilds, universities, and public lotteries. Crews are trained in diplomacy, ethnobotany, multiple languages, and non-violent protocol. Each voyage carries aboard a scribe, a physician, a priest and a scholar, a painter, a translator, and a peace steward, sworn to intervene before harm is done. They are prepared not for war, but for wonder. And so, in 1189, the ship Tranquillitas set sail west from Lisbon. After many weeks at sea, following celestial maps refined by Moorish astronomers, the crew sights land, lush, green, and unfamiliar. This is not the Caribbean. Not exactly. In this alternate world, the first encounter takes place on the coast of what we now call South Carolina, a gentle shore lined with forest and river. It is summer. The crew does not rush ashore. They anchor off the coast, raise a white sail of truce, and light a series of smoke signals using cedar and sage, taught to them by distant Norse explorers who once spoke of Vinland. And after 3 days they are greeted. A canoe approaches, cautious but calm. 3 people stand within it, representatives of a local Mississippian chieftain. They wear feathers, beads, and carry no weapons. The Arthurian captain, Lady Alira of Toulouse, steps to the edge of the ship and removes her sword. She sets it on the deck, far from her hand. She speaks not Latin but Algonquin, studied for months before departure. Her first words are not, "We claim this land." They are, "We greet you with open hands. May we sit beneath your trees?" The first encampment is not a fort. It is a garden. The Arthurian explorers build small, round tents in a clearing chosen by the local people. They use rope, not fences. They ask permission to gather water. They offer their own herbs in exchange. Gifts are exchanged: tobacco, beans, woven mats, olive oil, parchment, polished silver spoons. Language scrolls with simple phrases, music, flutes, drums, and hand-carved lutes. No flags are planted, no prayers are forced. Instead, a new word is shared between both sides. Tiowit, together. Scribes sketch every interaction. Painters capture not just the landscape, but the emotions, laughter, hesitation, curiosity. Children begin to play together. Arthur's creed, "No one shall take what is not offered," guides every exchange. After 3 months, the Tranquillitas prepares to return home. The ship is heavier now, not with plunder, but with dozens of plant specimens, detailed ethnographies, handmade crafts, recorded oral stories in new dialects, sketches of architecture, diet, music, and burial rites, and one more thing. 5 volunteers, 3 men and 2 women from the coastal village, who have chosen to travel back to Europe. They are not captives, they are ambassadors. Their names are sung in farewell.
Gifts are given for their journey. Their families weep not in fear, but in pride.
When the Tranquillitas returns to Bordeaux in 1190, thousands gather to meet it. Word has spread of the peaceful expedition. Songs have already been written. The 5 ambassadors are welcomed with ceremony and comfort, not spectacle. They are housed in guest halls lined with soft blankets. Teachers and students crowd the windows. Local children learn their words. Over the next year, an exhibition is hosted at the Great Hall of Concordia in Camelot. It features canoes and tools, stories painted on scrolls, plants arranged in garden beds, a reconstructed longhouse, a demonstration of maize preparation, a panel discussion between the ambassadors and local scholars. This becomes the first in a series of intercultural councils held every 5 years, inviting indigenous voices not only to be heard but to shape policy. European farmers begin planting new crops. Artisans mimic weaving patterns. Songs mix across languages. The New World is not seen as a place to be conquered, but as a partner. In this alternate history, the age of discovery unfolds as something slow and tender. No genocide, no slave ships, no conquest empires. There are, of course, misunderstandings, cultural tensions, even conflict. But the foundation is different. The first impressions were not of guns and armour, but of respect. By 1205, Arthurian settlements begin to dot the coastline, but each one is co-governed. Councils of settlers and indigenous leaders meet monthly. Laws are negotiated, not imposed. Intermarriage is common. Trade flows both ways. The transatlantic routes become not arteries of empire, but bridges of culture. In this world, by the time the 13th century dawns, Europe is no longer the centre of history. It is one voice in a growing world chorus. And so, dear listener, we arrive at the edge of our world. The Atlantic is calm tonight. The ships are smaller than legend, but their sails catch a gentler wind. In this reimagined past, we've seen the same people: Europeans, Native Americans, explorers, farmers, scholars, not as different, but as capable of difference. We've asked not what was, but what might have been. A new world met with open hands, an old world wise enough to listen. And through that rare, impossible choice, a new kind of future. Let this settle in your heart like mist on quiet water. Let it carry you to sleep, not in sadness, but in stillness. What would the world look like today if Arthur's legacy endured? A 21st century shaped by councils, chivalry, and a round-table world order. We have walked centuries together, through peace-touched crusades, early renaissances, and gentle ocean crossings. But now we open our eyes to a very different present, not our own, but the one shaped by Camelot. A world where the round table never fell, where kings ruled not by sword but by consent, where conquest never poisoned contact, and where wisdom, slow and deliberate, shaped a global age. This is not a utopia, it is a possible peace. Let us see what might have become of our world, if Arthur still reigned, not as a man, but as a guiding light. It begins with the Council of Realms, once a gathering of regional lords and scholars, now the World Concordium, an international assembly with no fixed capital. They meet not in a tower of glass, but in a circular hall nestled into a mountain glade. Every nation holds equal voice. Every decision requires patient agreement. There are no vetoes, only the long work of consensus. The Concordium's charter remains almost unchanged from Arthur's time. No voice shall rise above the others. No seat shall be made higher. Let the circle remain unbroken. Elections are held through ranked dialogue, not campaigns. Leaders serve short terms, then return to civilian life with honour, not power. And the figurehead? Not a monarch, but a steward of the table, elected by educators and farmers alike, tasked not with ruling but listening. They wear no crown, only a simple cloak marked by 7 stars, the 7 virtues of Camelot: mercy, courage, justice, curiosity, temperance, patience, and remembrance. In our real world, technology often races ahead of ethics. But in the modern Camelot, every advancement, every machine, every algorithm is reviewed not just for its function, but for its moral impact. The Circle of Insight, founded in the 1300s and still active,
brings together ethicists, inventors, and spiritual guides from across continents. Every major innovation passes through their review. Drones are used not for war, but for disaster relief and reforestation. Medical AI is taught on a library of multicultural healing texts. Social media is not designed for virality, but for thoughtful dialogue, moderated by digital versions of the Code of Chivalry.
Children grow up with tablets, but their first login requires them to swear an oath of kindness, not to a company, but to their peers. Knowledge is open source, no patents, no monopolies. Electricity is drawn from solar towers shaped like cathedral spires. And the most famous invention of the age? Not a weapon, but the bridge lens, a wearable device that translates languages in real time, allowing two people to speak from different lands and understand. There are still nations. Cultures remain proud and distinct, but borders are not walls. Each realm belongs to the greater order of the joined circles, a network of autonomous regions tied together by shared principles. No slavery, no war of aggression, open trade, shared environmental stewardship, freedom of worship. Travel is common, pilgrimage is encouraged, and in place of passports, travelers carry a circle stone, a digital token inscribed with their name, origin, and pledge of peace. It is not checked by armed guards, but by circle stewards, trained in welcoming strangers and resolving tension through language, not force. The idea of nationalism exists, but never overshadows fellowship. Even sports leagues are organised by virtue themes, not nations. You don't cheer for your flag, you cheer for your value, the league of bravery, the league of kindness, the league of wit. Without centuries of colonisation and conquest, Earth's ecosystems are healthier. The Amazon still breathes untouched in large parts. The Sahel is green again, thanks to cooperation between Saharan scholars and Celtic engineers who created wandering water wheels in the 1500s. Cities are not sprawling empires of steel, but layered gardens, built upward and downward, with space always left for quiet zones, communal groves, and story plazas where oral history continues. The sea levels are managed by a global pact signed in 1467, when explorers first noticed polar ice melting and took it seriously. The idea of endless consumption never took root. Goods are made to last. Repair is honoured more than replacement, and land is never owned, only borrowed from the next generation.
Perhaps the greatest achievement of this alternate modern world is the culture of universal reverent education. Every citizen, regardless of background, receives full access to history from multiple perspectives, philosophy beginning in childhood, music and language, conflict resolution, hands-on tradecraft. There are no grades, only personal maps of growth, and the final rite of passage is not an exam, but a story offering, a recorded tale from your life, shared with the circle to mark your entry into adulthood. Libraries are everywhere. They serve as shelters, forums, and playhouses. Education is not a ladder, but a spiral, always returning, always deepening. The line between teacher and student is soft, blurred by conversation and trust. And what of the knight? In this world, the knight remains, not as warrior but as public servant. Modern knights are chosen by community vote. They wear no armour, only sashes bearing the story of their deeds. Their tasks are not to battle but to mediate disputes, train youth in care and courage, serve during disasters, hold powerful institutions accountable. Their code is unchanged since Arthur's day: to speak truth, to protect the weak, to act with honour even in silence, and to kneel always before the dignity of every person. There are no superheroes, only people who show up, listen well, and stand gently where others fall. And now let us sit back and gaze across this imagined world. A modern Camelot, not gilded or perfect, but kind, where peace is not the absence of noise but the presence of listening, where difference does not divide but deepens understanding, where progress is not a sprint but a garden tended over time. In our real world, Arthur was a myth, but in this world, Arthur became a method, a memory, a mirror. His round table became the world's, and though the man is long gone, his echo lives, in every circle drawn in kindness, in every promise spoken with care, and in every voice invited to speak, equally.
Let that world settle softly into your thoughts. Let it hold you tonight like a quiet firelight. Not to forget the world we live in, but to remind us that gentler worlds are always possible, even if only in our dreams. Good night, dear listener. Sleep gently in the still past.